John Show, and I'm Ron.
I am John, and we're the Ron and John Show. We're known coast to coast like butter and toast. We can make ISIS surrender or die, and we can even make the nerdiest guy look kind of fly. We can drink like we've been singing all night long, and we can sing like we've been drinking all night long. So if you're looking for a good time, don't you delay. Tune into the Ron and John Show, because this Ranger and me, we lead the way.
Lead the way.
Hey,
Boom.
Boom. Hey, I'm in Camp Shelby, Mississippi right now, so I can only hold up my glasses.
Well, by any means necessary, right? That's
right.
That's what we talk about, right? Whatever it takes, whatever it's going to take.
Yeah, that's it, brother. So how you been, man?
Good, brother. Good. Just pushing through, been staying on my PT, which we were supposed to get after it last week with the second ID, right?
Yeah.
But the smoke up here got to us. But you know what? Still, I always find a way to adapt and overcome. The gym opened up just in time, so I was able to get out there and get it on. And it's been good. Good relaxing weekend. Not a whole lot of stuff going on besides that, and just staying busy with work, with obviously Veterans Lending Group here, brother. How about yourself? You've been traveling around, and you just got to Fort Shelby.
Yeah, I'm down here at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, working with the National Guard. This month is, as you know, brother, is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month.
Yeah.
But it's another one of the issues that in our military and in our society we have to deal with. And, I didn't want to, we're going to talk a lot about the things that cause people to go down the road of suicide and everything. But I wanted to talk about something that we had a lot of challenges with social and racial injustices and everything. And some people can think that we don't have a problem with that. But an incident happened this morning that tells me it's alive and well, that there is still racism in our nation. And so me and my FedOps compadres, Matt and Harrison, we went on a run out here on a trail. And we're running down the road, public property, and there's a gentleman on a park bench right there. He's got a really nice bike, and he's dressed very well, and he's laying on a bench, and he's an African-American man, and he waved at us, so we waved back to him. We just kept on running our PT. Well, we did our turnaround, we came back, and we were stopping, doing some push-ups and some other things, and a white gentleman come down with a dog, and he came by us, and he says, "Hey, don't worry about that guy on the bench back there." He said, "I just called the police." And I thought, here's an American who is on public property. He's doing nothing wrong. And the only thing I can think of is that he was guilty of being black and sitting on a bench. And so this guy said that. And so my colleagues and I were running back. I said, "That's blatant racism." I said, "The guy was doing nothing wrong." I said, "He's sitting on a park bench." So my point in all of that is, as much of progress as we've made, and you and I have certainly talked about this, and certainly you with your African-American and Hispanic heritage fully understand that we still have a long ways to go. And every time people think that this problem is not there, something like this morning happens here in the state of Mississippi that just really, I was on my mind all day. I couldn't believe that. I don't care what the guy was doing over there. He was not breaking any laws. He was on public property, Right. So anyways, not to continue on about that, but when we talk about these issues like that, racism, we talk about things like mental health and behavioral health, and we at a certain point, there are stigmas that are put into it, that the seeking of help or the admitting that there's things like racism or these other issues within our society, people continue to try and put a premium on it, and it causes a stigma to be associated with it. So I think our show today is going to be important, brother.
No, that's great. And one of the many things I love about you, brother, is this, just that you're not afraid to speak your mind, the truth, what you see, and what's really going on in our community, and you can't ignore it. And we never ignore it on this show, and obviously in our day-to-day lives. But just to have that dialogue and say, look, this is what's going on. These are things that are happening. And, you know, if you're one of those assholes that are doing it, then stop, you know, because it's not the right thing to do. What are you thinking? You know, and it's a shame to see, but, you know, it's something that we do have to bring up because it does add to what we're talking about today, because those stressors, right? It's a consistent, you know, another rock in the old rucksack, right? I mean, a person can only take so much, right? I mean, however strong someone might be, you don't know what they're carrying on their back. And it might be that one more that makes someone go down a path that nobody wants to see. So with that, brother, let's jump into, you know, our guests for today's show and the topics that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So today is going to be very important, Ron. Again, this is something, when we talk about suicide, we talk about depression, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, anger, grief, all the things associated with that may cause people to go down the road of considering suicide or ultimately committing suicide. We have two wonderful ladies on today, and you know, both belong to an organization called 𝘸𝘠₂𝘠, and it's focused on preventing suicide. Also, one of them, Tempa, she is the founder of Stay the Course. She is a spouse of a Marine veteran and an Army Reserve veteran. And Sara Compton, who is you know, the founder of 𝘸𝘠₂𠬶. Unfortunately, she knows suicide all too well, as her husband, a Marine, committed suicide. So let's bring these wonderful ladies, these wonderful Americans out, Vic. There they are.
There they are. All right.
Hello, ladies.
Welcome to the show, ladies.
Great to meet you.
I forgot to say, you know, Ron, that Tempa is also a board member with me on the FitOps Foundation, which
outstanding.
You know, we've done some collaboration a little bit.
I want to see what's on your schedule.
Anyways, so ladies, how are you today?
Doing well. I'm the beginning recovery of my broken ankle. So
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm propped up with pillows right now.
Okay, so let's just kick it off and get out of the way. Where was this? Was this a Sturgis accident or mountain biking? What do we got?
Well, this was a dragon accident in North Carolina. So I was riding the dragon on my motorcycle and crashed. So
okay,
it was a fun time until the end of it.
That's awesome. It usually is, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing well other than that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Fantastic. And how about you, Sara? Yeah. Great state of Texas?
Yes, sir. Great state of Texas.
Right. Okay. I see the heart back there.
You know, in Texas, we have to put the name Texas on everything. So
That's right. Propane and propane accessories, everything. I lived in Texas for a little bit, so I know all about that and Friday night footballs at the high school. So
Hey, so ladies, thank you both for being here. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
Oh no, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so thank you both for being here. And today we want to talk about, you know, the number one killer.
Oh, all right. Well, he'll be back. So I'll pick up where he left off. I'm pretty sure he was going to say the number one killer. There he is.
Yeah. So we're having some technical difficulties here. There may be some non-state actors involved trying to prevent us from talking about this here. But we're going to, you know, they have two options, surrender or die, okay?
That's right.
And we're going to continue to get on with this dialogue. But we know that the number one killer of our veterans right now is suicide. And in terms of where we're at on the active duty force, it is still a huge issue here today. So what I'd like to do first is, Sara, ask you about 𝘸𝘠₂𠬶 and why the foundation and or in the organization and you know, and where you're going with that.
absolutely. So 𝘸𝘠₂𠬶 was founded by a small group of Marines back in 2014 in response to that VA report that came out in 2012 that said that 22 service members die every day by suicide. And to be honest, I didn't know what 22 kill was until I very tragically lost my own husband to suicide. He was an active duty Marine, first sergeant, had been a Marine for 15 years. And, you know, he unfortunately and tragically took his life. And in my grief journey, I moved my children and myself out to Texas, where my husband came from. And I kept running into Tempa and our CEO, 𝘲𝘪𝘵𝘸, and Tempa's daughter, Tara, and just a really wonderful group of people in the community working in a capacity to try to get the word out that suicide in the military community is a huge problem, and that with tools, tips, and sometimes in clinical counseling, you know, there's things we can do to combat it. So yeah. I feel very privileged and blessed to now be able to work for this organization and, you know, somehow try to turn my tragedy into maybe somebody else's prevention.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, I actually had the opportunity to meet 𝘲𝘪𝘵𝘸. It was last year at Pray for a Soldier breakfast here in Washington State for the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation, and know a little bit about the organization, and it's phenomenal the things that you all do. And you know, there's the kind of the things that people don't know on the other side of that is because we hear veterans suicide a lot. You know, obviously the 22 a day, et cetera. But not a lot of people really think about what's going on in active duty, right? And it's great. I mean, is that something that your organization sheds light on both sides of that, of what's going on in the active duty community as well as the veteran community?
Absolutely. We try to stay as connected as we can with the local active duty components. We have a reserve base, a joint reserve base nearby in Fort Worth, and their active duty command and personnel, we try to get updated and let them know that we exist, we're here, and we want to help the active duty folks just as much as we want to help the veterans. In fact, you know, a lot of studies have shown that that transition period from active duty to civilian is really a critical time for a lot of our service members. And that's a time when a lot of them experience, you know, a lot of anxiety and depression, and maybe some issues come out that they had been pushing down for a while.
Yeah.
Hey, so I think I'm back now.
You're back, brother. Yeah.
Go to my remote setup here. So Tempa, can you talk to us a little bit about Stay the Course and what that's all about, and kind of your passion here, and then your background, if you can talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So Stay the Course came from a very personal experience with my husband and I and our family. We have 3 kids. My husband, when I married him, he was a Marine, just getting out of the Marine Corps, and he went into police work and stayed in the Marine Corps Reserves for a little while. And then, you know, he focused on his police career, and after 9/11 happened, you know, he was itching to get back into something. We, in 2007, he went back into the Army Reserves because he was almost 40. The Marine Corps wouldn't take him back. He was too old. And so he of course went into a special operations type of reserve unit and was deployed 8 months later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in 2008, I was a high school teacher. I had a high school student, middle student, and a college student. And we did the deployment. He was gone a total of 15 months. And we were used to, you know, crazy schedules and things like that. So I didn't think a thing of it. When he came home, the same man didn't get off the plane.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And our world just got turned upside down. We were a reservist family, so that's very different. We weren't as connected to that support that active duty has.
Mm-hmm.
And in the police world, he had a double whammy. He had the first responder piece, and the military piece. Kind of,
Yeah.
It made it very complex. So we searched and searched for help, culturally competent help. And it was very difficult to find the right counselors that really understood what we were going through.
Yeah.
The textbook does not do it justice. And so I just, through my own work in counseling, a fire was lit inside of me. And I knew I was being called to go and do something. So I left teaching. I went back to school, got my master's in counseling psychology, and I was dedicated and determined to help military families and first responder families too, because we do serve them as well. And so it was a journey from there. My husband ended up losing his police career because he received a PTSD diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And through my schooling and the experience and the setback of that, he took his police retirement and donated it so I could start 𝘲𝘪𝘵𝘀. So I founded 𝘲𝘪𝘵𝘀 with a really good friend of mine who I'd worked with at another nonprofit, Lindsay Hartley, and she was she did 2 tours in Iraq. She was, and she stepped out with me. We started 𝘲𝘪𝘵𝘀, providing individual, couples, family counseling, and culturally competent counselors were hired who really got it, whether they were either veterans themselves or family members of veterans. And that has been our secret sauce, is making sure that we create this community, this tribe, where people feel like they belong and that the people there really get their experience in some way.
Yeah.
And that's made a huge difference.
With everything happening now with COVID, is it? I mean, as far as the services that you offer, is it in person only? Have you gone online as well to take advantage of that technology to help across the country?
Yes, sir, we have. As a matter of fact, we were already doing it, so we were ready, and we just expanded out, and you pivot and you do what you have to do to help the people that you help, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we saw a dip in services right at the very beginning when everybody was kind of frozen, not knowing where to turn, what to do, and then immediately a huge spike in services as the stressors of this experience has been on people. Yeah.
So
that's what I was going to ask next. Is it if that had a contributing to that? If you saw that spike because you were more accessible, or did you see a spike because there's so much isolation that was going on due to COVID?
I think both of those are probably true. It's the stressors that people are undergoing, and not being able to go in person. Having that accessibility on telehealth is, it's now we're all doing our business that way, right? Mm-hmm. So we continued the in-person piece because we were considered an essential business. So we had a combination of in-person and telehealth.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Sara, one of the things that I do now, among other things, is I continue, Ron and I both continue to look to give back. And on any given day, I'm talking to upwards of a half a dozen veterans that I serve with, and especially in combat during the surge in Iraq in 2007 and 8, that were my privates back then when I was a brigade level sergeant major. And now they're in, their early 30s. They've been out of the military for 10 or 12 years. That sense of purpose is somewhat gone. And now these are, service members that performed heroically for our nation and everything. And now they're in their 30s. There might be some financial issues there. There might be some relationship issues. And I love every one of these men and women to death, but the majority of the time when I'm talking to them, they're calling me at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. They're under the influence of alcohol. And I've made a commitment to try and continue to answer that phone whenever I can. So my question is, when someone's been through a trauma like this, and with your husband, was it a process that you could see that he was going down a road that may not, or was this just something that all of a sudden that happened?
So my husband enlisted in 1999. He was an infantry Marine. He was very much, overseas in deployments in that hot time, 2004 to 2008. Would come home from deployments, like, Tempa was describing her husband. He would be different. He would definitely drink to excess. He would definitely, have nightmares and night terrors. And he would not talk about it. I think for fear of traumatizing me and our children and not wanting us to worry about it. So I guess, to answer your question, looking back, there were most definitely signs and symptoms. In fact, over the years, I'd say around 2012, 2013, I started to become very concerned for him and for his mental well-being. But at the same time, we were really concerned that if he did get that PTSD diagnosis, that he would lose his job, lose his career, lose his life. So we made the decision to seek help outside of DOD. We paid out of pocket. We went out in town and we saw counselors and psychiatrists, and he did get diagnosed with PTSD and he was prescribed medication. But what I definitely want people to know who may be experiencing the same thing, either an active duty family or a veteran family, is that was wrong of us and that was wrong of me. Fear of losing a career, I look back and obviously can see now is nothing compared to losing your loved one. And I didn't think for a moment back then that suicide was an option. But you can't really look rationally and try to explain rationally a disease of the brain, which is what depression, anxiety, PTSD is. And so my advice to offer, just based on my own mistakes and my own, fears of security in terms of job and that sort of thing, is none of that really means anything in the long run. So I would definitely encourage anybody who may be feeling some anxiety, some depression, or showing some symptoms, excessive drinking, that sort of thing. I would definitely encourage them to seek help within the chain. Because ultimately, it's having your loved one here is everything.
Right.
I'm so
absolutely
glad you said that. So I think I shared with you ladies the first time we did a Zoom call that here I was, the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense, and I'm about a year out from retirement, and my wife gave me an ultimatum and said, "Hey, look, we're a year out from all of this being over, and it's just going to be us, and we can't live with how much anger you have and how much you run around and you're pissed off all the time." And so I initially went to seek treatment to appease my wife. I thought I hadn't drank the Kool-Aid. I was like, hey, I'm just an angry old sergeant major. Isn't that what I'm supposed to be? And when I met my therapist, and I was not going in there looking for pity or sympathy or anything. Really, it was to appease my wife. But then after I got in there and I could see that this lady really knew what was going on inside my head, that now I wanted understanding, but I didn't want sympathy or pity. And when I got diagnosed with PTSD, I had to walk out of that doctor's office and I had to walk to Secretary Jim Mattis, the warrior monk, Mad Dog, Chaos, whatever you want to call him, and him and fighting Joe Dunford, who was my immediate boss, the chairman. I had to walk and tell them that I had PTSD. In all of the, I'm a recon guy that for 38 years did a lot of walking with a lot of weight. But the most weight I've ever had on my shoulders and the longest walk I ever did was at 200 meters to tell the two most senior leaders in our entire U.S. military that I was in treatment for PTSD. But I knew I had to do it because if I didn't do it, I would be a hypocrite to every other service member out there that is looking to seek help and get over this stigma of seeking help, or any veteran out there. So I absolutely agree with you, Sarah. It's hard to do it, but in the end, no job, nothing is worth losing a service member. So thank you for that, Ron.
Yeah, absolutely. Tip, I have a question for you. So I have friends that are also in law enforcement that are veterans as well, and you know, one of them is one of my closest friends. And could you describe for our audience that double whammy, right? Because a lot of people don't really understand that when you have someone that's a veteran that's served in combat, and then they come back and now they're in law enforcement. And, you know, all those things that go along with that, as well as, you know, what law enforcement see a lot of times is pissed off veterans that want to hurt themselves as well. Can you describe that a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure. You know, obviously there's a reason that veterans go into law enforcement. There's, you know, they're cut out of the same cloth, basically. But what's important to know, the difference is that, you know, you go on deployments and you get to come home. You get to be off your deployment. First responders do not. And they're rarely off duty when they're off duty, because they truly cannot stop being, you know, that person, even when they're off duty. I know my husband, we couldn't even go out to eat in a restaurant. This was even before he, you know, did his deployment, because, you know, his training kicked in at everywhere we went. He was a police officer, you know, and that's who he was. And so they never let their guard down. There's never a time to relax. So when your body is releasing those stress chemicals, you know, that all of that cocktail of chemicals that your body releases on an ongoing basis, it erodes that nervous system and it changes the brain. And so that's really important to know. So that double whammy is really powerful, because they go from their military experience to this daily, day in and day out experience that never ends.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was talking to my my buddy, and he basically just said, you know, I just don't want to carry a gun anymore, you know, and it's like, yeah, I could see that, you know, and get that, and you know, we've talked enough to where, you know, I have an understanding of that side of it, as far as he can describe to me, but that was pretty powerful. It's like, wow, that's, you know, the weight of that. You know, just weighed heavy on me, on my heart when he said that.
And another thing is, there's not a safe place for them to go, because I believe John or Sarah, one of you said, they're wanting to protect their family.
Yeah.
They, you know, veterans do that. So do first responders. It's like, I can't expose my family to what I've seen or what I've experienced today. So I'm going to stuff it down. And I'm stuffing it down until it comes out like a volcano at some point. Or if you're a leader, you know, you don't want to be vulnerable to your men. Just, John, that's amazing. That's leadership. You stepped up and you were a model for your people.
Yeah.
You allowed yourself to be vulnerable.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I talk now when Ron and I do seminars and we talk about PTSD and suicide prevention is, you know, the normal reactions to abnormal circumstances that we have been through and how it causes hypervigilance, as you were describing, Tempa. And so I would ask, you know, we would get in these conversations and people, well, you know, I don't have challenges or anything like this. And Sarah, this is kind of getting back to the point you were making. But I asked him, I said, well, when you can go into a restaurant with your family, do you make sure that you sit so that you can have eyes on all avenues of approach into and out of that restaurant? Yes, I do. I said, to include the kitchen where the staff is coming out? Yes, I do. Or when you are walking down the road or you're outside and a vehicle pulls up slowly or it pulls over and stops, you immediately go into an imaginary low ready position with an imaginary rifle as if you're back in Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, yes, I do. Well, these are normal reactions to the abnormal circumstances we've served under. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is something wrong with this other than we have been through these traumatic events, and this is our way of dealing with it. And and my question is, in my opinion, until we normalize that these are normal reactions to abnormal circumstances, we'll never get beyond the stigma. So both of your ladies' experiences, how do we get beyond this and further normalize that some of the traumatic things we go through will create this hypervigilance and will cause us, as Tempa, you described, to stuff it down. But how do we get beyond that so that it's more understanding, both in the military and in law enforcement and with our veterans?
So I think, to echo what Tempa said, I applaud you for that tremendous leadership and for kind of sticking, your head out there and making it okay to not be okay at the highest position. Activities like that, actions like that, these conversations, this podcast, and ultimately suicidal ideations, trauma, it is something that is prevalent in the military, law enforcement, first responder culture, but it's also prevalent in the civilian culture. Civilians are the loved ones of our service members and our first responders. And I think the more that we can explain that, trauma is trauma. PTS is, just as you said, it's a reaction to the abnormal situation. I think the more that we can help people understand that these situations can happen to anybody, and the way to help it and to normalize it, if you will, to end the stigma is just to scream it out and just to not be afraid about it. I admire and I applaud you. And I myself was diagnosed with PTSD after I lost my husband. And so while I will never understand what my husband saw in battle and what you saw and what Tempa's husband saw, I can at least have some sort of understanding of what that means and what that means to me, and how I can work with that and work through it to be a better person and a better mother.
Well, I think being a military spouse with a husband or a wife that's in combat is a little bit tougher, because I think when we're in combat, we're in our safe space because we know the circumstances. We're wearing 60 to 80 pounds of kit. We have weapons. We have our battle buddies on our left and right and everything. But the fallout of that, whether it's loss or wounded service members or, memorial services and everything, you all deal with that back home. And I think, as you described, that has a certain effect on the military spouse that, is as equally as traumatic and causes post-traumatic stress. So I appreciate you sharing that.
And if I could chime into that question briefly, this is a human problem, and that's basically what you're saying, Sara. It's a human problem. We've had human struggles since the beginning of time. We have these diagnoses that we label things with, but really we're designed biologically to respond the way we respond. And until we are able to change the culture and allow people to talk about what they need to talk about openly, that it's not okay to be okay sometimes, then we're going to continue with this issue. So just to give you a couple of numbers to back that up, in the highest suicide rates in the USA are Montana, Alaska, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Idaho. So they're all remote states. A lot of isolation.
Yeah.
There's a higher prevalence of gun ownership in those states. And so, the rates have gone up in those states. They've increased 30% over the last 20 years.
Wow.
So the more we isolate, the less we talk about it, the less it's okay, the higher the numbers get. And I appreciate you guys having the courage to have these conversations on your podcast, because this is what it takes. They need to hear people like us I myself was affected and impacted by the struggles that we went through. I came close to losing my husband.
Yeah.
He came close to losing me. Like, it was this big bucket of toxicity that we had to heal. We had to heal all that. And normal, everyday people have that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, what I've, in my experiences, I've done last 5.5 years, been involved with suicide interdictions and interventions. Actually going through one right now, but what we've seen is, you know, when you talk about this as a human problem, and we're seeing a lot of this in active duty, and for some folks that haven't even deployed. Not that matters, because the thing is that now we back that up, and what I've experienced with myself is some of this stuff doesn't have shit to do with what I had happen in the military.
Exactly.
A lot of right. Exactly. I mean, let's back it up. I mean, if we're gonna have the conversation, let's have the damn conversation and talk about the life that we had before we even went into the military. And
Exactly.
you know, and it wasn't until I started actually sharing my story, which was, you know, in, you know, Riverside, California. I had probably, I think it was 6 friends that were murdered before I even hit 17, so on and so forth. And for me, I thought that was normal until I think it was probably 15, 20 years later that I was sharing the story to an audience, and everyone was just like, and I'm like, what's going on? That this is just like what it's supposed to be. But could you share about that a little bit, about what you know, your experiences with the organization and just people in general, of how much that matters, you know, the childhood and things, or whatever traumas that happen led up to that we don't face, right? And a lot of it, and I'll say for me, going into the military, going into the Rangers, for me was the toughest, hardest thing. That I wanted to do this. It was literally, I didn't care. That, I mean, it's a weird way. It's like, I don't give a shit anymore. I'm going to go do this. It's better than what the hell I got back here. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So you didn't think you had anything to lose?
No.
Yeah.
No,
so
zero.
That is a common thread. So in my experience, you know, over the last 10 years of working as a therapist, you know, and I specialize in working with traumas. The childhood, the prior military piece is a huge common thread. And I would say it's extremely consistent. We're actually doing some research studies within our organization about the correlation between trauma and, you know, childhood trauma, military trauma, and even how the relationships and attachments affect how you respond to trauma as well. So it's really, it's phenomenal how all of it works together.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, I think we got a question from the audience.
All right, brother.
Question from the one and only Cliffy Clavin.
Oh, Cliffy Clavin. There we go. All right. So
every organization has, or any of, you know, podcasts like this has that guy that always comes on and they know their place. You know, they go to the Cheers bar. Their seat is always there. Ours is Ed Sullivan, so we call him Cliffy Clavin here. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah. So Cliffy Clavin, Mr. Ed Sullivan says, I had a question for Sara and Tempa. I'm currently pursuing a master's in psychology, and I'm hoping to work specifically with veterans with PTSD. Do you have any advice or recommendations on how to work with them, given your own experiences with that population?
Sara, go ahead.
So what I would say first and foremost, that, you know, I don't want to speak for all veterans and I don't want to speak for all first responders, but from my experience, what our clients crave is authenticity. If that authenticity comes from personal experience in service, there's a point of connection. If that authenticity comes from a personal experience in the classroom, or some way for you to connect with that client on a human level and let them know that you understand their trauma in a way that is more than, you know, having read it in a textbook. To personalize and humanize, I think, is really what we all want and need.
Completely agree. Authenticity is it. Really becoming culturally competent with the military culture and understanding that all military is not the same. We have many subcultures within the military, and that's very important, you know, and don't assume. I would say military probably, they create silos even maybe more severely than the civilian population. Just from my experience, it's, you know, and so we can't automatically say, well, if you put 8 veterans in a room for group therapy, that those are automatically going to be the best fit.
Yeah.
And so really becoming culturally competent, and, you know, if you're a veteran yourself, awesome, or if you have family members or friends, really sit down and talk and learn about what that is about, because then you'll be able to connect and do some really great work.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, brother.
Awesome. So, Sara, we started off talking about 22 kill. So for you all, what's the future look like? And where are you taking this organization? And the same with Stay the Course, Tempa, if you can kind of describe where you're looking at going in the future.
Sara, do you want that one?
Sure, thanks. We're so excited to look ahead, look towards the future. You know, even though things seem really uncertain, right, in this time of pandemic and in this time of really sort of unprecedented social upheaval in some of our major cities, there will always be a place with us and with the nonprofit organizations we work with to love, support, and want to help veterans, active duty, first responders, and their family members. In fact, you know, you'll be hearing more and more the name One Tribe Foundation. As we grow, and as we have grown over the years, we've sort of outgrown the name 22 Kill, because, you know, as we talked about earlier, that number 22 represents veterans who die by suicide, but that number doesn't necessarily hold that same meaning to law enforcement officers and fighters and EMTs and all that other whole host of clients that we serve. So in the future, you'll be seeing a lot more of the name One Tribe Foundation, but 22 Kill isn't going to be going anywhere. That's our roots, that's where we come from, that's who we are, and that will definitely be in existence as awareness and outreach.
And our vision is to expand beyond the Texas borders. So that's a very important part of our vision as well. We have our non-traditional programs, our national programs, but our evidence-based therapy is within Texas for now.
Gotcha.
For now.
Yeah. Ron, I think we got another question coming in through.
Okay, let's see here. We go. Let's see. What advice do you have for other wives? Are there signs that people can watch out for? Which this is a phenomenal question. You know, when we were just when John and I were speaking at Second ID, you know, a room full of first sergeants and command sergeant majors, and said, you know, the canary in the coal mine, the person that's probably going to know what's going on with you first is the spouse. How many people here are married? And all of them shoot their hand up. And I said, okay, well, ask your spouse if anything has changed. So please weigh in on that, ladies.
Please.
Only speaking from my own experience, the largest mistake I can point to was thinking that he and I could handle it outside the chain of command, that, you know, once we had a name and a diagnosis and some sort of plan, that we can handle it, we got this. But we didn't. I had no idea what we were up against. And so much what I've learned, you know, doing my own work and my own therapy, is that the diagnosis is just the first step, really. I mean, that's just sort of coming to terms and really realizing that there's a lot of work to be done. So much more important beyond that is the consistency and being able to stick with some sort of treatment plan that may include either clinical therapy or peer support or what have you. Having gone outside the chain like we did, we really were at the mercy of his deployment schedule, which was every year. So, if he wasn't deploying, he was working up to deploy. So we really kind of set ourselves up for failure. And I deeply regret not having, like I said, not having gone through the DoD chain of command and, taken whatever work consequences, if there were any. Maybe there wouldn't have been. And I am happy to say that I'm hearing more and more that active duty folks who are reporting these things are not having any negative impact on their career. In fact, those brave people that are willing to talk about mental health can really serve as that example for so many others.
Right. And I would like to offer a few more detailed warning signs. Withdrawal, that isolation, withdrawing from the things that they used to love doing and people they love. That's a really huge thing. Also, unexplained anger and just behavior that's outside of their norm, And I do want to tell the audience out there, there's not a cookie cutter formula here.
Yeah.
Okay, it's an individualized thing. There's not one way to do it, and because the families can't carry that much weight on their shoulders. Okay, and I'm kind of speaking to Sara too. There are the best, vision is hindsight, correct? So, we can learn from the past, and hopefully we can improve the future. But everybody's different, and it doesn't always happen the same way. And so we're not going to be able to help everybody the same way. One thing that's really important is purpose. If someone has lost their purpose, and they will lose their way. That rings true over and over. And we talk about that with the fit ops, right? So, and so purpose is important, and doing things in your life that are building resilience and filling your cup. Those are the things that keep us going.
Yeah.
What advice would you have, or how do you even start the conversation? There's, from a military spouse or from a spouse's side of point of view, and some of them might be thinking that is, God, where do I even start?
Mm-hmm.
Because of fear, of real fear because of seeing how, the reactions are. I mean, I was married once. It's probably why I'm divorced, but I mean, it's still, I remember there's times where I, would clear a wall off of stuff and, so
yeah.
Where does that even start?
Right. So some things I've learned as a spouse and with working with other people as well. Time and space is important. Finding that time when they're not activated, that's not the time to have the conversation. So if they're angry or if they're withdrawn, you can't make them talk. So, if you can try to look for that opportunity that's creates safety for them. And if you notice these behaviors coming across as a very non-judgmental ally, you want to be an ally to this person, non-judgmental, even if they say they're drinking too much or using some kind of drug or they were out all night, coming to them with this idea of, I'm really concerned about you, and use that evidence in your favor. I'm noticing these things and I'm really, really concerned that you don't want to live anymore. And so it doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing. It just needs to be a small, non-judgmental, easy conversation. And that you never know where that can lead. And the second most important thing, or really the first, but they're come close, non-judgmental and listening. You have to listen. Let them talk it out.
Yeah. This will be the first time I shared something like this. So the two things that I think drove me into treatment was grief from loss, from 5 combat tours of men and women, but also fear being the fear of not being prepared. And so my wife Sandra and I, when I was the SEAC and we lived in this huge house on Joint Base Meyer Henderson Hall, and I was always an early bird because I had to be up early at 3:30 in the morning and PT and all that. So whenever Sandra was with me in the house and she would be downstairs watching TV, I could sleep, relatively safe and everything and everything. But if she was traveling to visit our kids and grandkids or whatever, I would make sure that all the doors were, dead bolted, and I turned on every light in the house except the bedroom light, and I slept sideways in the bed so I had eyes on the door. And I was on the most secure base. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff lived across the street from me, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Chief of Staff of the Army. I was surrounded by these general officers that had all this security, but still that fear of not being prepared and drove me to do things like this. And when I shared that with my therapist the first time, she was like, okay, that's normal. She says, so this gets to the question that, one of our viewers has down there, Ron, and I'll let you deal with that.
Yep. Which is from Rhonda Copeland. And she asks, how do you talk to someone out of suicide, or do you especially if they won't go for help? It's a good one.
So, I'm not a clinician, and I'll, defer to Tempa for the clinical side of it, but I don't think you can talk somebody out of the act of suicide. I think you can try to make somebody feel safe and loved and wanted, and try to assure them that they have value and worth and it's better with them here. But I don't think that you can talk somebody out of suicide.
That's correct. We cannot save other people, and especially if they don't want to help themselves. What the key to it is listening and helping them find the reason they want to live, right? And so that's where those conversations happen. It's let's take the conversation back to what's keeping you here? Where's your lifeline? Helping them discover those lifelines of purpose and loved ones and things like that. So as a therapist, we want to help build that resilience and that belief in themselves that they can actually help themselves. So the therapist is not saving me, I'm saving myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just so for me this month it's been really interesting. Tough, we'll say. So this is this month is the third year that my Ranger buddy Matt Wilson suicided, which is especially important because that he and I actually planned out together of what it would look like on how we could warn transitioning service members about what's going on the outside, and look at what we got here, with John and I. And so that's something that goes through my mind every time. But also this is also going through doing an interdiction right now with another good Ranger buddy that we're together. That all knew each other. Anyhow, that's one of the things that we kept reiterating was, the value that he had, where he was at in life, and he was toward the point where he was telling him, speaking about himself, like, what? No, I'm not a dumbass. I can do this. And it's like, and it was, it's something that probably it takes practice, obviously, or I'm not a trained clinician at all. John and I are just two guys that give a damn about our brothers and sisters, right? But there's something that happens when they start doing that self-talk and that building it up, where it's not like, okay, I've got them, but it's a point of, okay, here we go. And let's keep that momentum building, right? Let's keep that going. Let's come up with a plan. Let's do this. And I just put out the other day, like it was in a crisis situation, because here I am about to meet with them. We've been doing this going back and forth all week, but I knew that also when I met with him, I needed to have a plan, because at that point he had said, you know what, just tell me what to do. What's going on? I don't know. I need a purpose, I need to drive. And in that moment, it was a crisis situation, more so because if you're going to get involved with this type of work, you can't come in with no plan and say, well, we'll figure it out, because then they'll figure it out themselves. Right. Yeah. So, but anyway, just to piggyback off of what you were saying is, is get that self-talk where it begins to build them up. I mean, shit, it's even something, I mean, I have to admit, I do that every single morning when I wake up. Are you the person for this? Is this what you're supposed to be doing? Then I look at what we're doing and what John and I'm like, hell yeah, I am, but even, it's something that has to be consistent. So maybe you could just discuss that, because I do it all day long, and maybe some people can connect and relate to that and think, well, shit, maybe, man, I do that same thing.
Right. It's a practice that we have to do every day. And it's normal for self-doubt to play into our lives. Right. And so, practicing those skills those are resilience building skills. So how do I talk to myself? Am I talking to myself worse than I would my worst enemy? Mm-hmm. And yourself, that's all you have really in this world outside of people outside of you, right? Yourself, you can't love others until you love yourself. And so how you speak to that self in there is very powerful. And what you believe about yourself is very powerful. Mm-hmm. So that practice, I recommend for everyone. That's the best suicide prevention, is by making that a daily practice.
Wow. Absolutely. And, to congratulate yourself and acknowledge yourself for the small victories. A lot like you, Ron, there are days where I don't want to even get out of bed, and I still struggle sometimes. And it's okay to congratulate myself for getting out of bed and going to work, even if it's not maybe the best or the finest. It's okay. Small steps.
Yeah. Well, ladies, we are coming down to the end here of this. We could sit here and talk all night about this, but I just want to say thank you both for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. God bless you both. You are true treasures to our nation, and I really appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate the sacrifices you make. And thanks for being on the show today.
It's an honor. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Ron.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, and this is we talked about this actually. Jared from 𝘬𝘠𝘭𝘆 Brewing kind of brought it up as a topic, and it is something obviously that John and I talk about regularly. We do try to normalize it as much as possible on any platform that we have, but the work that you all are doing is it's so very important. There's not a lot of organizations out there that really get after the mission when we talk about saving lives. So just this one last little plug: how can someone get involved with your organization? Because it's from wherever they are. What can they do to help you?
So obviously, starting with our website, 22kill.com, and you can send email info@22kill.com, and just start a conversation. Let us know what you're interested in. We need volunteers, we need donors, we need other supporters and advocates in other states, because it takes the whole tribe to help others. So I may need to call you up in Washington or, wherever I have connections. It's going to make a difference for the people we serve. And we have to bring together our resources. And so I just encourage you to get on our website or email us at info@𝘲𝑒𝑡wo-kill.com and let us know how you would like to help, because there are many, many ways.
Absolutely. And we're also on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff. So
awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, ladies. And for all of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in to another Ron and John show, brought to you by Veterans Lending Group, where we can ETS, PCS, retire wherever you go. We are licensed in all 50 states, and we are the special operations of VA financing. Until next week, we'll catch you on another Ron and John show next week. We'll see you there. Ladies, again, thank you.
Thank you, ladies. God bless you both.
Thank you.
Ron and John show. Make sure you get your PME hard, your PT in, retaining that purpose physically to continue to help you mentally and emotionally. We'll see you all next Wednesday.
Boom.